There's a photograph I took when I was 11 years old. It's a picture of an empty refrigerator, just the light bulb glowing, 3 bare shelves, and a single ketchup packet from a fast food restaurant I'd walked to 6 blocks away. I took that photo on day 9. There were 21 days left to go. My mother was in Paris. She was eating croissants, posting selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower, and falling in love with a man who knew I existed and didn't care. She left me $20, a debit card with no PIN, and a sentence I can still hear in my sleep. "You're old enough. Don't be dramatic." I was 11. What happened after she came back, tanned, smiling, rolling 2 designer suitcases through the front door, ended with a CPS officer at our kitchen table and a judge's signature on a custody order. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I go on, if this story speaks to something real in your life, take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read them. My name is Elise. I'm 24 now. Let me take you back to a Tuesday in June, the day my mother handed me a $20 bill and walked out the door for 31 days. But first, before I take you back to that summer, you need to understand something. By the time I was 24, I had built a life that didn't include Janine Holt. Not because I hated her, because I finally had air to breathe. I worked as an administrative assistant at a pediatric clinic on the east side of town. Small office, good people, decent insurance. I lived in a studio apartment with a window that faced a parking lot, which sounds depressing until you've spent a month in a house where the power got cut and the only light came from birthday candles. A parking lot with a working street lamp? That's luxury. My mornings were simple. Coffee, toast, bus to work. I answered phones, filed charts, scheduled appointments for kids who had parents that actually showed up. There's an irony there I didn't appreciate at first. It was a Thursday in October when everything cracked open again. I walked out of the clinic at 5:15, keys in hand, already thinking about the leftover pasta in my fridge. And then I saw her, a woman standing next to my car in the parking lot. Thinner than I remembered. Hair dyed a shade of blonde that didn't quite match her roots. Clothes that looked like they used to be nice. Maybe 2, 3 years ago. It took me a full 4 seconds to recognize my own mother. She smiled. That smile. The one that always meant she needed something. "Hi, baby. You look so grown up." I stopped walking. 3 meters between us. My keys bit into my palm because my hand was shaking and I hadn't noticed until right then. She tilted her head, softened her voice, a move I'd seen 1,000 times. "I wouldn't come all this way if it wasn't important, Elise. You know that." I didn't know that. What I knew was that the last time this woman stood near me, I weighed 67 pounds and a judge had to intervene. But she wasn't done talking. Her second sentence told me everything. "I need your help with something. It won't take long." 13 years of silence, and she opened with a favor. I should have gotten in my car and driven away. I know that now. But there's a thing that happens when you grow up invisible. When someone finally looks at you, even the wrong someone, your body freezes before your brain catches up. I didn't invite her to my apartment. That much I managed. We walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the clinic. I ordered black coffee. She ordered a vanilla latte with oat milk and extra foam, then smiled at the barista like they were old friends. She started with small talk. My job, my apartment. "Oh, you look so healthy, so pretty." Compliments that arrived 13 years too late, wrapped in a voice that hadn't earned the right to deliver them. I waited. It didn't take long. Janine was applying for a position at an assisted living facility. Something in patient care. The background check had flagged her. A record in the state central registry. Child neglect, substantiated. Her file. My name. She couldn't get hired. She leaned forward. Lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret instead of asking me to erase one. "All I need is for you to write a letter. Just say the situation was exaggerated, that you were fine. Then sign the expungement request. It's a simple form, Elise." She stirred her latte, eyes steady, waiting. And then she said the thing. "You owe me, Elise. I gave you a roof over your head for 11 years. I made mistakes, fine, but you're not the only one who's suffered. I stared at the foam swirling in her cup. And for a moment I wasn't 24 anymore. I was 11, standing in front of an open refrigerator with nothing inside but a light bulb and a ketchup packet. The smell of a house that no one had lived in properly for weeks. She said, mistakes, the way someone says traffic. Like it was just something that happened to her. I left the coffee shop without answering her. Didn't explain, didn't argue. Just stood up, dropped $4 on the table for my coffee, and walked out. I could feel her staring at my back through the window as I crossed the parking lot. But I didn't turn around. I drove home. Sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet. Stayed there for maybe 20 minutes, just breathing. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Under the tax folders and the apartment lease, there was a notebook. Floral cover, faded pink and yellow, the spine cracked in 3 places. I hadn't touched it in years. Next to it, a USB drive the size of my thumb, tucked inside a sandwich bag. I picked up the journal, opened it to the first page. The handwriting was small, pencil. The letters tilted slightly to the right the way a child's hand does when she's pressing too hard because she's trying not to shake. Day 1. Mom left. $20. I read that line 3 times. Janine wanted me to say the truth was exaggerated. She wanted me to write a letter telling the state of Ohio that a 31-day absence and $20 was a misunderstanding. So let me tell you the truth, day by day. Exactly as I wrote it. This journal saved my life, and it destroyed hers. But before I take you back to that June, you need to understand why I didn't call anyone. Why a girl who could write in a journal every night and walk 6 blocks to a dollar store couldn't pick up a phone and ask for help. The answer is simple. And it's the worst part of the whole story. I was more afraid of being rescued than being hungry. My mother made sure of that. To understand Janine, you have to picture her the way everyone else saw her. Pretty. Put together. Always the first to laugh at a dinner table. She had this talent for walking into a room and making everyone feel like they'd been waiting for her. At parent-teacher conferences, the rare ones she attended, teachers loved her. "Your mom is so sweet," they'd say. I'd smile. Sure. Sweet. At home, Janine was a different frequency. Not loud, not violent. Just absent. Like she was always mentally standing in another room, looking at a version of her life that didn't include me. She told people she was a single mom. She told them she sacrificed everything. And if you only saw the outside, you'd believe it. She worked at a real estate office answering phones. Came home tired. Reheated whatever was cheapest. That part was real. Being a single parent is brutal, and I won't pretend it isn't. But here's what the outside never saw. When I was 8, I got a fever that lasted 4 days. Janine had a friend's birthday party on day 2. She left a pot of soup on the stove, already cold, and told me to take the medicine on the counter. "Don't call me unless it's an emergency," she said, "and a fever isn't an emergency, Elise." When the school scheduled parent conferences, she didn't show. I told my teacher my mom worked the night shift. She didn't. She just didn't want to go. I heard her on the phone once, talking to a coworker. "Being a single mom is the hardest job in the world," she said. She laughed after she said it. That easy, charming laugh. I was eating dinner alone in the kitchen when I heard it. Cereal, because there was nothing else. She knew it was hard. She just didn't want to do it. "I work all week so you can eat, Elise. You could at least not make me feel guilty for wanting one night out." That was her favorite line. She used it so often I stopped counting. Keith Ballard showed up when I was 10. He sold insurance for a mid-size firm, drove a silver sedan he kept spotless, wore polo shirts on weekends and smelled like department store cologne. He wasn't mean to me. That would have been easier to explain. He just didn't see me. I was furniture, a lamp in the hallway, something Janine had to step around on her way to the life she actually wanted. Every plan he made was, we should. We should try that new Italian place. We should drive to the coast this weekend. We should book that wine tasting. We never included me, and Janine didn't correct him. Not once. The weekends changed first. Friday afternoon, Janine would start getting ready. Curling iron, nice blouse, perfume that smelled like gardenias. Keith's engine would rumble in the driveway at 6. Door would close. I'd hear the car pull away. Then nothing. Until Sunday evening. At first, she asked our neighbor, Mrs. Pritchard, 3 doors down, to check on me. A retired woman with cats and a bird feeder. She'd knock Saturday morning, ask if I needed anything, bring a muffin sometimes. But after a few months, Janine stopped asking her too. I was 10 years old, alone from Friday night to Sunday night. I learned to make ramen, to set an alarm, to lock the deadbolt twice. One evening, Janine forgot to pick me up from school. Just forgot. She and Keith were at dinner somewhere. I sat on the bench out front for 2 hours while the sky turned dark, and the security guard finally called her. She pulled up smiling, told the guard, "Oh my God, work was crazy today. I'm so sorry." In the car, silence. Not one word, not one apology. The engine hummed. Keith's cologne lingered on the passenger seat. I deserve to be happy too, Elise. Don't make me feel bad for living my life. I started writing in a journal that fall. Not because anyone told me to, because if I didn't write it down, I'd start believing none of it was real. There was one person in the world who made me feel like I existed. My grandmother, Ruth Perry. Every Sunday when I was little, before Keith, before the weekends alone, Grandma Ruth would pick me up and take me to her house. She had a small kitchen that always smelled like butter and rosemary. She'd cook while I read at the table, and sometimes she'd quiz me on vocabulary words while stirring gravy. She bought me my first journal, a purple one with a butterfly on the cover. "Write down the things that matter," she told me, "even the hard things. Especially the hard things." But Janine and Ruth did not get along. It started the year I turned 9. Ruth pulled Janine aside after a Sunday lunch and said quietly but clearly, "Janine, you're not taking care of that girl the way she needs." That was the end. Janine drove us home in silence. By the following week, Ruth's number had been deleted from the house phone. When I asked for Grandma's address, Ruth had sold her old house and moved to a smaller place. Janine said, "Your grandma doesn't want to see you anymore, Elise. She told me that herself." I was 9. I believed my mother. It wasn't true. None of it. Ruth had tried. She drove to our house 3 times that year and knocked on the door. Janine didn't answer. Ruth sent birthday cards every single year. Janine intercepted them all. I found this out much later, and when I did, something inside me cracked in a place I didn't know I'd been holding together. 3 knocks on our door. I can picture it. The doorbell ringing once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. Ruth standing on the porch with a card in her hand, waiting for a door that would never open. "Your grandma is toxic, Elise. She wants to control everything. That's why I had to cut her off. For us. For us." She always said us when she meant herself. "The last piece you need before I take you into that summer is the lock Janine put on my silence." I was 10. My teacher that year, Mrs. Goodwin, had noticed something. I brought the same lunch every day. A peanut butter sandwich on white bread. Nothing else. One afternoon she asked gently, "Elise, does your mom pack your lunch, or do you make it yourself?" I almost told her the truth. Almost. But I caught myself and said my mom was just really busy. Mrs. Goodwin nodded. Let it go. That night I made the mistake of mentioning it, just casually. "My teacher asked about my lunches today." Janine's face changed. Not angry. Scared. The kind of scared that has nothing to do with your child and everything to do with yourself. She sat me down at the kitchen table, grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to hold. "If you ever tell anyone what happens in this house, they will take you away. Do you understand? You will go to a group home. No birthday, no Christmas. No one will want you. Is that what you want, Elise?" I shook my head. "Good. Then we keep our business in this house. That's what families do." That was the lock, and I carried it in my chest for years. 2 months later, Janine came home glowing. She and Keith had booked a trip. 4 weeks in Europe, Paris, Rome, Barcelona. She showed me the itinerary on her phone like she was showing me a report card. I said, "What about me?" She barely looked up. "You'll be fine. You're practically a teenager." She didn't call Grandma Ruth. Didn't ask Mrs. Pritchard. Didn't arrange anyone. June 3rd. A Tuesday morning. Janine zipped 2 red suitcases, left a $20 bill on the kitchen counter next to a debit card I didn't have the PIN for, and walked toward the front door. She didn't hug me. She didn't look back. "There's food in the freezer. Don't answer the door for strangers. And Elise, don't be dramatic." The sound of those suitcase wheels rolling across the tile. Then the door. Then the car engine. Then nothing. 31 days of nothing. I stood at the window and watched her car turn the corner. I waited for brake lights. For the car to stop. For her to realize what she was doing and come back. The street went empty. I turned around. The house had a sound I'd never noticed before. The hum of the refrigerator. The tick of the wall clock. And underneath all of it, a kind of silence that presses against your ears. The silence of a place with no one else in it. I opened the fridge. Half a carton of milk, a few slices of processed cheese still in the plastic, a squeezed bottle of mustard, 1 packet of ramen on the shelf above the stove. In the freezer, 3 boxes of store-brand pizza, the kind that costs $1.99 each. I sat down at the kitchen table and counted. $20. The dollar store 6 blocks away sold ramen in packs of 4 for $1. Peanut butter, $1.50. Bread, $1. If I ate 1 meal a day, I could stretch the cash to maybe 10 days. That left 21 days with no plan. I didn't write in my journal that first night. I just lay in bed and listened to the house breathe. Day 2, I walked to the grocery store on the corner, a real one, not the dollar store, and tried the debit card. The machine asked for a PIN. I guessed Janine's birthday. Wrong. I tried the year I was born. Wrong. I tried 1, 2, 3, 4. Wrong. The screen locked me out. The cashier gave me a look that still lives somewhere in my stomach. I walked home with nothing. Day 3, I opened my journal. Day 3. I ate cereal without milk. The milk went bad. I poured it down the sink, and the smell made me gag. Mom didn't call. She didn't call on day 1 either. I checked the phone twice. No signal. The phone doesn't work. I wrote because if I didn't write, I would cry. And if I started crying, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stop. I wasn't scared yet. Not the real kind. That came on day 7. Day 5. I knocked on Mrs. Pritchard's door. 3 knocks. Waited. 3 more. Waited. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her blinds were drawn. I tore a page from my journal and wrote a note. "Mrs. Pritchard, this is Elise from 2 doors down. Can you please call me when you're back?" I slid it under her door and walked home. She never called. I found out later she was visiting her son in Michigan. Gone the whole month of June. My one neighbor. Gone. Day 6. I picked up the house phone. I already knew, but I did it anyway. Held it to my ear. Nothing. No dial tone. No static. Just dead plastic. I pressed it to my ear 7 times that day, like maybe the 7th time would be different. Janine hadn't paid the phone bill. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she didn't. I could have walked somewhere. The police station was maybe 12 blocks away. I knew where it was. I'd passed it on the school bus. I put my shoes on. I stood at the front door with my hand on the knob, and I heard her voice. "They will take you away. Group home. No birthday, no Christmas. No one will want you." I took my shoes off, sat on the floor, stayed there until the light through the curtains turned orange. That night, I opened the laptop. Janine's old desktop computer that she'd left because it was too heavy to take. The Wi-Fi was dead, but sometimes, if I sat near the back wall of the kitchen, a faint signal leaked in from a neighbor's unsecured network. Enough to load one page if I waited long enough. I checked Janine's bank account. The joint one. The one my name was technically on. The one the locked debit card was connected to. Balance. $0. She'd withdrawn the last $40 before she left. Day 7. I'm scared, but I can't tell anyone because then everything will get worse. I have $11 left. $11. 24 days to go. By day 9, I could feel my body starting to argue with me. Not hunger the way you think about it. Not the I skipped lunch kind. The kind that sits low in your stomach and hums. A constant, low-frequency ache. I was eating once a day. A peanut butter sandwich if I had bread. Plain ramen if I didn't. The 3 frozen pizzas had been gone since day 6. On day 10, I walked to the dollar store. I had $7 and change left. I needed ramen, bread, maybe another jar of peanut butter if I could swing it. I was doing the math in my head when I passed the display rack near the registers. Disposable cameras. $3.99. I don't know why I picked one up. That's not true. I do know. I knew exactly why. Because when Janine came home, she would say I was lying. She would say I was being dramatic. She would roll her eyes and tell me there was food in the house the whole time. I'd watched her do it my entire life. Reshape the story until what actually happened stopped being real. Not this time. I bought the camera. I went home. I opened the refrigerator and took a photograph. Bare shelves. 1 light bulb. A ketchup packet from a fast food restaurant that I'd walked to 3 days earlier and spent $1.07 on a small fries. I photographed the bank statement on the computer screen. $0. I photographed the calendar hanging next to the stove, each day crossed off in pencil. I photographed the note I'd left under Mrs. Pritchard's door, still visible through the gap. Day 12. The power went out. No warning. Just darkness. The hum of the refrigerator stopped, and the house went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Janine hadn't paid the electric bill either. I found a box of birthday candles in the junk drawer. 12 left from my 10th birthday. The only birthday she'd bothered with a cake. I lit one. Sat at the kitchen table with my journal. The candle made my shadow huge on the wall. Then I remembered the computer had a webcam, and the UPS battery backup still had a charge. I opened the laptop. Hit record. I didn't plan what to say. I just talked. Day 12. It's dark. The lights went out. I'm talking to the camera because there's no one else. The file saved to the hard drive. I didn't know what it was worth. I just didn't want to be alone in the dark without a voice, even if it was my own. 4 birthday candles left. I discovered the church on day 13. 4 blocks south, past the laundromat and the auto parts store. A brick building with a hand-painted sign that read, Community Meal, Saturdays 11 a.m. I'd walked by it 100 times on school days and never once paid attention. I showed up that Saturday at 10:50, stood at the end of a line that stretched along the sidewalk. Nobody asked my name. Nobody asked why an 11-year-old was standing in a food line alone. I was tall for my age. Maybe they assumed I was 13, 14. Maybe they just didn't want to make it worse by asking. A woman in a green apron handed me a paper bag. Bread, 2 cans of soup, an apple. She smiled at me. A real one. Not Janine's smile. I almost cried right there on the sidewalk. I held it together by biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Saturday. Got bread, canned soup, and an apple. The lady at the church smiled at me. I almost cried. 2 days later, the neighbor's Wi-Fi signal drifted through again. I sat on the kitchen floor with the laptop and waited for Janine's social media page to load. It took 4 minutes. And there she was. Rome. Golden light. Janine in a sundress, holding a gelato cone, laughing at something Keith said. The Colosseum behind them, out of focus but unmistakable. Her caption, Living my best life. #Eurotrip. #blessed. The next photo, a restaurant patio, white tablecloth, wine glasses. Caption, Missing my baby girl back home. Can't wait to bring her souvenirs. Missing me. She missed me so much she posted about it instead of calling. So much she didn't leave a working phone number. So much she drained the bank account before she left. I didn't cry, I took a screenshot. Day 17. Mom posted pictures. She wrote, "Blessed. I ate canned soup in the dark. 11 days left." She was coming back. And everything she'd built, the image, the story, the version of herself that other people believed, was going to collapse. But not because of me, because of my 6th grade teacher. The school district ran a summer enrichment program for 2 weeks at the end of June. I didn't sign up because I wanted to learn. I signed up because they served lunch. Day 25. First day of the program. I put on the cleanest clothes I had, a t-shirt that hung looser than it used to, and jeans I'd been tightening with a hair tie through the belt loop. I walked to school the way I'd walked everywhere that month. One foot, then the other, slow enough to save energy. It was 91 degrees that day, the kind of heat that sits on your chest. We were outside for physical education. The teacher had us running laps. I made it halfway around the track before my vision went white at the edges. The ground tilted. My knees gave out. I don't remember hitting the grass. When I opened my eyes, I was in the nurse's office. Cool cloth on my forehead, a box of crackers on the table, a juice box already opened, straw already in, and a woman sitting in the chair beside me, watching me the way no one had watched me in a very long time. Mrs. Helen Whitfield, 6th grade English. She had reading glasses pushed up on her head and a lanyard full of keys around her neck. She didn't look scared. She looked focused, the kind of focus that means someone is paying attention for real. "Elise, how long have you been eating like this?" I reached for the crackers instead of answering. She waited. Then, quieter. "Elise, who's taking care of you this summer?" Janine's voice. "Group home. No one will want you." I looked down. Mrs. Whitfield leaned forward. Not crowding me, just closer. "Elise, you don't have to protect anyone right now. Just tell me the truth." I held the juice box with both hands. They were shaking. The straw rattled against the foil. "My mom is in Europe. She's been gone for 25 days. Mrs. Whitfield stopped breathing. 3 full seconds. I know because I counted. Then she put her hand on my shoulder, light, steady, and said, "You did the right thing, honey. I'm going to help you now." She stood up. She walked to the phone on the wall. She dialed. But she didn't call my mother. She called CPS. They came the next morning. Donna Chase was a caseworker with the county's Department of Children and Family Services. Mid-40s, short brown hair, a navy blazer over a white blouse that she wore like a uniform. She carried a clipboard and a canvas bag, and she knocked on my front door at 9:15, with Mrs. Whitfield standing one step behind her. I opened the door. The house behind me said everything I couldn't. No lights. The power was still off. The air inside was stale and warm, the kind of thick that clings to your skin when a house hasn't been properly opened in weeks. The kitchen counter had 3 empty cans of soup lined up next to the sink. The trash hadn't been taken out because I couldn't reach the dumpster lid in the alley. Donna Chase didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She just walked through the house slowly, the way someone does when they're reading a room the way you read a page. She opened the refrigerator. She looked at the calendar. She noted the crossed-off days, 26 X marks in pencil. Then she turned to me. "Elise, do you have any records? Anything you wrote down or saved?" I went to my bedroom and came back with the journal, the floral one, faded pink and yellow. I handed it to her. Donna opened it, read the first line, turned the page, read the next. She didn't speak for a long time. She just kept turning pages, each one dated, each one written in careful pencil by a child who had no one to talk to except a notebook. When she looked up, her eyes were red. I showed her the disposable camera. 22 exposures. I showed her the folder on the laptop. The webcam recordings. Day 12 in the dark. Day 15. Quieter. Day 20. Barely whispering. Donna took photos of every page. Click. 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 The sound of the shutter was the loudest thing in that house in weeks. She turned to Mrs. Whitfield. Her voice was low, but I heard it. This is one of the most documented cases I've ever seen from a child this age, and she didn't even know she was building a case. Then she knelt in front of me, eye level. Elise, you are not in trouble. You haven't done anything wrong. I need you to understand that. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. We're going to find your grandmother. Donna Chase made 3 phone calls that afternoon. It took less than an hour to find Ruth Perry. She lived 45 minutes away. Same county. A 2-bedroom rental near a community garden. She'd been there for 3 years, ever since Janine cut her off, and she'd never stopped trying to reach me. Donna confirmed it. Letters sent, cards returned, visits unanswered. Janine had built a wall between me and the one person who actually cared, and she'd told me it was the other way around. Day 27, 4 days before Janine's flight home. I was sitting on the front steps when the car pulled up. A blue sedan, older model, clean. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. Silver hair in a low braid, glasses on a chain around her neck. Sneakers, jeans, a cardigan that looked like she'd been wearing it since I was small. She saw me. She stopped moving. One foot on the curb, one still in the street. Her hand came up to her mouth and stayed there. I was thinner. She could see that from the driveway. My collarbones showed through my t-shirt. My shorts hung low on my hips. She walked to me slowly like she was afraid I might disappear. Then she held me, and I smelled it. Butter and rosemary. The same as when I was 6, 7, 8. Sunday mornings in her kitchen, vocabulary words over gravy. A smell I thought I'd never get back. I'm here, she said. I'm not leaving. She signed the emergency guardianship forms that afternoon. I packed a backpack, journal, camera, the USB drive I'd copied the webcam files onto, and 2 changes of clothes. That was everything I owned that mattered. In the car, Ruth opened the trunk. Inside, a gift bag with tissue paper. She set it in my lap. I've been keeping your birthday presents, every year. I kept hoping. Inside the bag, 5 birthday cards. 1 for every year since I'd turned 9. Each one signed in blue ink, each one with the same line. I love you, Elise. I'm still here. 5 cards Janine had never let me see. That first night at Ruth's house, I slept 9 hours straight. I hadn't done that in 30 days. She made scrambled eggs in the morning, set a glass of orange juice next to my plate without asking if I wanted it, sat across from me and said nothing while I ate. She didn't need to talk. She just needed to be there. And she was. But the clock was ticking. Donna Chase came by that afternoon. She sat with Ruth at the kitchen table and I stayed in the next room. The door was open, and I wasn't trying to hide the fact that I was listening. Donna didn't seem to mind. The file has been opened, Donna said. Child neglect, substantiated. When Ms. Holt returns to the country, she'll be contacted by our office. We've coordinated with local police. No one's going to meet her at the airport. That's not how we do this. But when she arrives at the house, there will be someone there. Ruth nodded. Her jaw was tight. What happens to Elise? You have temporary emergency custody. That holds until the family court hearing. Given what we've documented, I expect the court to formalize something longer term. I sat on the floor of the hallway, knees pulled to my chest. I could hear everything, and inside me, 2 things were fighting. Part of me wanted it. Wanted someone to look at what she'd done and say it out loud. Wanted a judge, a file, a record, proof that I wasn't dramatic, that this was real, that it mattered. And part of me, the part that still called her mom in my head, was terrified. Because once this happened, there was no pretending anymore. No going back to the version of us where she was just a tired single mom, and I was just a quiet kid. Have you ever wanted justice and been scared of it at the same time? Wanted someone to be held accountable but also wished you didn't have to be the reason it happened? If you know that feeling, tell me in the comments. Because at 11 years old, I didn't have a name for it. I just knew my hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days. In 3 days, she would walk through that door expecting everything to be exactly as she left it. July 4th, Independence Day. You can't make this stuff up. Janine's flight landed at 4:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because Donna Chase called Ruth to confirm. I was sitting on the porch steps at Ruth's house, watching the neighbor kids set up sparklers in their driveway. I could smell hot dogs grilling 2 houses down. Somewhere down the block, someone set off a bottle rocket and a dog barked. Inside, the phone rang once. Ruth picked it up. I heard her say, "Understood. Thank you." She came to the screen door. "Donna says they're in position. Elise, you stay here with me." I nodded. I wasn't there when it happened. Everything I'm about to tell you, I learned from Donna Chase's report and from Ruth, who spoke with Donna that same evening. But I've imagined it so many times that it plays in my head like a movie I can't turn off. Janine and Keith took a cab from the airport. 2 suitcases each. Designer stuff. Matching luggage sets they'd bought in Barcelona. Janine's skin was tan. She had new sunglasses pushed up on her head. She was laughing about something when the cab pulled up to the house. Keith pulled the bags out of the trunk. Janine walked up the driveway, keys already in her hand. She might have noticed the unmarked sedan parked 2 houses down. She might not have. She unlocked the front door, stepped inside, called out like she always did when she came home from work and expected me to be waiting. "Elise, I'm home." The house answered with the same silence I'd been living in for 31 days. She kept walking. She turned the corner into the kitchen, and she stopped. Donna Chase was sitting at the kitchen table. Not standing. Sitting. Calm. Hands folded on a manila folder. Beside her, the journal. My journal. Open to a page near the middle. Next to it, a row of photographs laid out in order. The refrigerator. The calendar. The bank statement at $0. A still frame from the webcam. Me, sitting in the dark, lit by the glow of a laptop screen, ribs visible through my shirt. A uniformed officer stood near the back door, quiet, arms at his sides. Donna looked up. "Ms. Holt, please come in." Janine didn't move. I imagine this is the moment her brain tried to rewrite the scene. Tried to find the version where this made sense, where she was still the protagonist, where there was an explanation that ended with her being right. She couldn't find one. 3 seconds of absolute silence. No one breathed. The only sound in that kitchen was the hum of the refrigerator, the same one I'd listened to for 31 nights. Donna had called the electric company 2 days earlier to restore the power. The house was lit. Every detail visible. Janine's suitcase hit the floor. The handle clattered against the tile. No, this can't be happening." Donna's voice didn't change. Flat. Professional. The kind of calm that sounds louder than shouting. "Ma'am, please sit down. We have some questions." Behind Janine, Keith appeared in the hallway. He saw the officer. He saw the photographs on the table. He took 1 step backward. "Where is she?" Janine's voice cracked, but it wasn't worry. I know what her worry sounds like. I'd never heard it directed at me. This was the sound of someone realizing the audience had changed. "Where is my daughter?" Donna Chase didn't blink. "Your daughter is safe, Ms. Holt. She's been safe for about 48 hours now, the first time in a month." Janine sat down. And then she did what she had done her entire life. She started performing. The tears came fast, 3 seconds flat, perfectly timed. She pressed her fingertips under her eyes like she was protecting mascara that didn't need protecting. "There's been a misunderstanding. I arranged for my neighbor to check on her. Mrs. Pritchard. She was supposed to come by every day. I don't know what—" "Mrs. Pritchard was out of state the entire month of June," Donna said. "We confirmed with her directly. She had no knowledge of any arrangement." Janine shifted. The tears kept coming, but her eyes were scanning. Donna's face. The officer. The photographs. Calculating. Elise has a tendency to exaggerate. She's always been sensitive. She probably just didn't answer the door when... Donna picked up one of the photographs. The refrigerator. Bare shelves. Light bulb. Ketchup packet. "Is this exaggerated, Ms. Holt?" Janine looked at it, looked away. I'm a single mother. Her voice rose. Do you have any idea how hard it is? I work 50 hours a week. I needed a break. One break. Every parent. The officer spoke for the first time. Quiet, but the kind of quiet that fills a room. Ma'am, you left a minor child unattended for 31 days with $20 and no working phone. That is not a break. Janine's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then Donna did something that I think about to this day. She turned the laptop on the table around. She pressed play on a file. My voice. 11 years old. In the dark. Day 12. It's dark. The lights went out. I'm talking to the camera because there's no one else. The video played for 41 seconds. My face lit by the screen. My ribs through my shirt. The birthday candle melted to a stub on the table behind me. Janine turned her face away. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, oh my God. She turned away from the screen the way you turn away from something you don't want to see, not because it's painful, but because it's proof. Ms. Holt, I want to make sure you understand, Donna said. We are not here because Elise reported you. We're here because her teacher saw a child who was starving. What happened next was procedural, methodical. The kind of quiet devastation that arrives on official letterhead. Donna Chase informed Janine that the Department of Children and Family Services had opened a formal case. The finding, child neglect, substantiated. Her name would be entered into the state central registry. A permanent record accessible by any employer in healthcare, education, childcare, elder care, or any field involving vulnerable populations. A family court hearing would be scheduled within 14 days. Temporary emergency custody of Elise Monroe had already been transferred to Ruth Perry, maternal grandmother. You can't do this, Janine said. Her voice was small now, deflated. She's my daughter. The court will determine that, ma'am. Keith stood in the hallway the entire time. He hadn't sat down, hadn't spoken since they'd arrived. Now Donna turned to him. Mr. Ballard, your name appears in our records as a cohabitating adult who was aware of the child's living situation and participated in the trip abroad. We'll need a statement from you as well. Keith's face went gray. I didn't know. I thought she had arrangements. I thought someone was... You purchased both plane tickets, Mr. Ballard. Your credit card. We have the transaction records. Keith looked at Janine. Not with love. Not with anger. With the cold, calculating look of a man measuring the distance between himself and the nearest exit. Keith? Janine's voice had that edge. The one I recognized from childhood. The one that meant, stand by me or else. Keith said nothing. He looked at the floor. And in that silence, something between them broke. Not dramatically. Not with a fight. It just cracked. Quietly. The way ice cracks on a pond before it gives way. He hired his own lawyer the following week. Separate representation. He wanted his name off her file. The relationship was over, not ended by a breakup, but by a liability assessment. Donna placed a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. The hearing notice. The sound it made when it touched the wood was almost nothing, a whisper of paper against oak. But to Janine, it might as well have been a gavel. I gave her everything, Janine said. To no one. To the room, everything. And this is what I get. The family court hearing took place on a Wednesday morning in a building that smelled like floor wax and coffee that had been sitting too long. I wore a blue polo shirt that Ruth had bought me the week before. She'd ironed it that morning. I remember watching the steam rise off the collar while she pressed it. Careful, precise. The way someone prepares you for a thing that matters. She drove us downtown without the radio on. Neither of us talked. There wasn't much to say that the next 2 hours wouldn't say for us. Janine was already seated when we walked in. She had a lawyer, a man in a gray suit that Keith had apparently paid for before cutting contact. Janine's hair was pulled back. She was wearing lipstick. Even here, even now, she was performing for an audience. The county attorney representing CPS was a woman named Sandra Webb. Mid-50s, glasses on a chain. She spoke the way Donna Chase wrote reports. Clean, factual, without decoration. She read from my journal. Day 1. Mom left. $20. The room was still. Day 7. I'm scared, but I can't tell anyone because then everything will get worse. I looked at my hands. Day 12. No lights. I found birthday candles in the junk drawer. I have 4 left. Someone in the gallery shifted in their seat. That was the only sound. Day 25. I fainted today. A teacher helped me. She was the first person to ask if I was okay. Sandra set the journal down. The courtroom had the particular silence of a room full of people who are each privately imagining a child alone in the dark with a birthday candle. Judge Margaret Haynes looked at Janine over the rim of her glasses. Ms. Holt, do you dispute any of the entries in this journal? Janine's lawyer leaned in, whispered something. Janine straightened. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Then, Ms. Holt, where is the debit card you left for your daughter? It was in her name. She had access. The card was locked, Ms. Holt. The PIN was never provided to the child. Were you aware of that? Janine opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The clock on the wall ticked 5 times before the judge spoke again. I've been on this bench for 19 years, Judge Haynes said. This journal is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence I have ever received from a minor. She paused. Not for drama, for weight. The court finds as follows. Full legal custody of Elise Monroe, minor child, was transferred to Ruth Perry effective immediately. Janine Holt's parental rights were not terminated. That's a different process. But her custodial rights were stripped. She would be permitted supervised visitation, twice monthly, only if Elise consented. The finding of substantiated child neglect would remain in the state central registry, permanently. Any employer conducting a background check in healthcare, education, social services, elder care, or child care would see it. There was no expiration date. Keith Ballard, listed as a knowledgeable cohabitating adult, received a separate finding: failure to report suspected neglect of a minor. Prohibited from unsupervised contact with any non-biological minor child. Janine sat at the defendant's table. Her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder. She was crying. Real tears this time. I could tell the difference because I'd spent 11 years studying the fake ones. These were the tears of someone watching something slip away. But the thing she was mourning wasn't me. It was control. The ability to shape the story. That's what broke her. When we walked out of the courtroom, Janine was in the hallway. Ruth held my hand and kept walking, eyes forward, but Janine stepped into our path. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought, maybe now. Maybe the words, I hope you're happy now. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you okay? Not, I failed you. I hope you're happy now. She walked past me and I caught a trace of her perfume. Something expensive. Something new. Bought on a trip paid for with money that should have fed me. Ruth squeezed my hand once. Hard. We kept walking. Ruth's house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a window over the sink that faced a row of tomato plants she'd been tending for years. Nothing about it was fancy. Everything about it was real. The first morning, I woke up to the sound of eggs cracking into a pan. I came into the kitchen and there was a plate, toast, eggs, a glass of juice. Ruth was already sitting across the table reading the newspaper, like this was just a regular Tuesday. Like I'd been there all along. How was your day? She asked every single evening. Sometimes I said fine, sometimes I said bad. She listened either way. She never once told me I was being dramatic. The years after that moved the way years do when they're not being survived. They just passed. 7th grade, 9th grade. I started making friends. Real ones. I joined the school's creative writing club because a teacher told me I was good with words. By sophomore year, I was submitting short stories to the school magazine. By senior year, I won an essay contest. Ruth taped the certificate to her refrigerator. It was still there last Thanksgiving. She wasn't rich. Her pension from 26 years as a postal worker covered the bills and not much else. But there was always food in the fridge, the lights always worked, and every single birthday there was cake. I turned 18, graduated, got a job, started community college at night, moved into my own place at 20. It was a studio the size of Ruth's kitchen, but the lease was in my name and the door locked from the inside. Janine never called, never wrote, never showed up for a single supervised visit. I used to wonder if that meant she didn't love me. Eventually, I realized it meant the same thing it always had. I was only useful to her when I served a purpose. At 22, I got the job at the pediatric clinic, filed charts, answered phones, helped nervous parents check in their kids. I hadn't opened the journal in years. It sat in my desk drawer, quiet, the way a fire alarm sits on the wall. You don't think about it until you need it. Then, on a Thursday in October, Janine was standing next to my car, and I understood. The alarm was about to go off again. I thought she'd take the hint. After I walked out of that coffee shop without a word, I thought, that's it. 13 years of nothing, and now she'll go back to nothing. Janine had always been efficient about cutting people off. I'd watched her do it to Ruth, to friends, to coworkers. I assumed she'd extend me the same courtesy. She didn't. Day 1 after the coffee shop, a text from a number I didn't recognize. I just want to talk. Please, Elise, that's all I'm asking. Day 3. You can't ignore me forever. I am your mother. Day 5. She called Ruth. Ruth told me about it that evening, her voice the particular kind of flat it gets when she's angry but choosing not to yell. Janine had cried on the phone, told Ruth that I was being cruel, ungrateful, that all she wanted was a chance to make things right, and her own daughter wouldn't even speak to her. Ruth listened. Then she said, Janine, you had 11 years of chances. I'm hanging up now. She hung up. But on day 7, Janine found another angle. She tracked down one of my coworkers on Facebook, a girl named Dana from the front desk, and sent her a private message. Please tell my daughter to call me. I'm her mother, and she won't speak to me. I don't know what I did wrong. Dana showed me the screenshot on her lunch break. She looked uncomfortable. I didn't respond to it, but I thought you should see this. I stared at the message. The words "I don't know what I did wrong" sat in my chest like a splinter. Part of me, the old part, the 11-year-old part, whispered, just sign the paper. Give her what she wants. It's easier. You're fine now. It doesn't matter anymore. But I went home that night and opened the drawer. I took out the journal. Turned to day 12. No lights. I found birthday candles in the junk drawer. I have 4 left. It still mattered. I've changed, Elise. Her last text read. But you won't even give me a chance. What does that say about you? It said I finally learned what she spent 11 years trying to beat out of me, that I was allowed to say no. I called the legal aid clinic at my old community college on a Monday morning. I knew about the clinic because I'd walked past their office every semester for 2 years, free consultations for students and alumni. I'd never needed them before. Now I did. The attorney who took my case was named Paul Beckett. Late 30s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of guy who drinks his coffee black and keeps a pen behind his ear. He listened to everything, the texts, the Facebook message, the coffee shop ambush. He asked calm, precise questions. He didn't look surprised. We can send a cease and desist letter, he said. It's not a court order, but it puts her on formal notice. If she contacts you again, directly or through a third party, or shows up at your workplace, we file for a restraining order. That one has teeth. He drafted it that afternoon. I read it twice, signed it once. The letter was addressed to Janine Marie Holt. Not Mom, not Janine. Her full legal name, printed on a letterhead with the legal clinic's address, citing specific dates, specific incidents, specific statutes. At the bottom, I asked Paul to include a paragraph. It wasn't required. It wasn't legal language, but I needed to say it. I will not sign any document to expunge your record. That record exists because of choices you made. I was 11. I did not choose to be left alone. I will not choose to erase the truth now. Paul raised an eyebrow when he read it. Then he nodded. I'll include it. The letter went out via certified mail. Return receipt requested. Paul also told me something that landed like a stone in still water. Even if I had signed Janine's form, the expungement almost certainly would have been denied. A substantiated finding in the state central registry requires significant new evidence to overturn, not just a victim's letter. Janine had told me, just sign and it goes away. It wouldn't have. She was manipulating me. Again. One more performance. One more script she needed me to follow. The printer hummed. The pen scratched paper. The envelope sealed shut. I didn't write that letter to hurt her. I wrote it so she would know. The little girl who was afraid of group homes doesn't live here anymore. 5 days after the letter was mailed, Janine came to my workplace. Monday, 9 in the morning. I was at the reception desk entering patient records. The waiting room was half full, a mother bouncing a toddler on her knee, an elderly man flipping through a magazine, a teenager with earbuds and a splinted wrist. The front door opened, cool air from outside. Janine, different from the parking lot. Thinner, hair messier, eyes rimmed red. But that could have been real or rehearsed. She wore a wrinkled coat and sneakers that didn't match her purse. She looked like someone losing a fight with her own life and blaming the referee. We need to talk, right now. I'm not leaving until you listen to me. The toddler's mother looked up. The teenager took one earbud out. I stood. Here's what I did not do. I did not shout. I did not cry. I did not apologize. I did not reach for the phone. I spoke at the same volume I use when I tell a parent their child's appointment has been moved to Tuesday. Janine, you were sent a cease and desist letter 5 days ago. You are at my workplace. I'm going to ask you one time to leave. Don't call me Janine. I am your mother. I looked at her. Directly. The way I couldn't when I was 11. The way I'd spent 13 years learning how to. A mother does not leave her 11-year-old alone for a month with $20 and no phone. You lost that title in a courtroom 13 years ago. The waiting room went silent. The mother holding the toddler pulled her child closer against her chest. The old man lowered his magazine. The teenager stared. Nobody moved. Janine stood in the center of that silence with her mouth open and nothing coming out. My office manager, Linda, appeared from the back hallway. She'd heard everything. She positioned herself between Janine and the reception desk, arms crossed. Ma'am, I need you to leave, now, or I'm calling the police. Janine looked around the room, every face, looking for someone who would take her side. The mother, the old man, the teenager. Nobody moved. She turned, walked out. The glass door closed behind her with a soft pneumatic hiss. I sat down. My hands were steady. My heart was not. But I didn't need it to be. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth is already loud enough when you stop whispering it. Linda called the police non-emergency line before Janine's car left the parking lot. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no handcuffs. An officer came by 40 minutes later, took my statement, accepted the copy of the cease and desist I kept in my work bag, and wrote it up. Violation of a cease and desist notice. Documented. Forwarded to the county attorney's office. The officer, a woman about my age, short hair, steady eyes, explained it plainly. If she contacts you again in any form, in person, by phone, through a third party, you can petition for a restraining order. At that point, any further contact becomes a criminal matter. I signed the incident report. She tore off my copy. The paper was thin, the kind that smudges if you press too hard. Dana brought me a cup of water after the officer left. She sat in the chair next to my desk and said nothing. Just sat there. Sometimes the best thing a person can do is be present without needing to fix anything. I called Ruth on my lunch break. Sat in my car in the parking lot with the engine off. It's over, Grandma. A pause. Then Ruth's voice. warm and certain, the way it always was when things that needed to happen had finally happened. Good. Come home for dinner tonight. I'm making your favorite. I have thought many times about what it would have been like if no one had ever seen me. If Mrs. Whitfield hadn't knelt next to me in that nurse's office. If Donna Chase hadn't turned to the right page. If Ruth hadn't picked up the phone. At what point does a person stop being invisible? I used to think it was when someone finally looks at you, but I think now it's when you stop hiding. When you stand up at a reception desk and say a true sentence out loud and don't apologize for it. I was 24 years old, and for the first time, I wasn't performing invisibility. I was done. Let me tell you what happened to Janine. Not because it brings me joy, but because consequences are the only language some people hear. The job at the assisted living facility, the reason she'd come back after 13 years, was gone. The state central registry finding meant she couldn't pass a background check for any position involving vulnerable populations. Not healthcare, not education, not childcare, not elder care. The thing that sent her looking for me was the thing she could never undo, because I wasn't the one who put it there. A judge did, based on evidence. Evidence I didn't even know I was creating. The cease and desist violation was on file with the county. One more incident and I had grounds for a restraining order, which would create an additional legal record. Another flag on another background check, another door closing behind her. Keith Ballard. Gone. He'd disappeared into another state the week after the original hearing, 13 years ago. Hired his own attorney, separated his name from Janine's wherever he could. Their relationship didn't end with a fight. It ended with a billable hour. The social media accounts, the ones with the hashtags and the blessed selfies and the missing my baby girl captions, were deleted. Dana had mentioned the Facebook message to a few people at the clinic. They mentioned it to a few people outside the clinic. In a small town, information moves at the speed of gossip. The image Janine had spent decades constructing, devoted mother, self-sacrificing single parent, was gone. And she couldn't spin it anymore because there was a paper trail, from hashtag living my best life in Paris to a borrowed room in a friend's apartment, unable to get hired. Not because I attacked her, not because I exposed her, because I stepped to the side and let the consequences she'd been outrunning for 13 years finally catch up. I didn't destroy her life. She made her choices 13 years ago. I just stopped standing between her and the results. 3 weeks of silence. I had started to believe it was finally over. Then Ruth called me on a Tuesday evening. A letter came for you. She sent it to my address. Not directly to me, through Ruth. Technically not a violation. Janine had always been precise about the edges of rules she was willing to bend. I drove to Ruth's that night. The envelope was on the kitchen table, handwritten. My name in loopy cursive. I opened it standing up. Dear Elise, I know I made mistakes. I know I wasn't perfect, but I am still your mother and I always will be. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. I've changed. All I want is for us to be a family again. Mom, P.S. If you could reconsider the letter about my record, I would really appreciate it. I just need a fresh start. I read it twice. She wrote, I made mistakes. Plural. Vague. The way you describe getting a parking ticket or forgetting to return a library book. Not the way you describe leaving your child alone for 31 days in a house with no power, no phone, and no food. She wrote, I wasn't perfect. As if the gap between perfect and criminal was a rounding error. And then, the P.S. The real purpose, the part the apology was packaging for. One more request. One more form. One more time she needed me to perform a function. She signed it in lipstick. I'm not making that up. Not ink. Not pen. Lipstick. The same way she signed postcards to friends from vacation. Even her apology was a performance. I didn't reply. Didn't tear it up. Didn't burn it. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the desk drawer. Next to the journal. Next to the USB drive. Next to the birthday cards Ruth had saved for 5 years. If she ever came back again, I'd have one more piece of evidence I didn't ask for and she handed me voluntarily. The drawer closed with a quiet click. The same drawer, the same journal, but a different girl deciding what to keep. It's morning as I tell you this, a Saturday in October. I'm sitting in my studio apartment with a cup of coffee that's almost too hot to hold. I just opened the refrigerator. Full. Milk. Eggs. Spinach. Leftover pasta from Thursday. A container of soup. Ruth dropped off last Sunday. 2 apples. A block of cheese. You don't understand what a full refrigerator means until you've opened one at 2 in the morning and found nothing but a light bulb and a ketchup packet. Now, every time I open that door and see food, something in my chest releases, a muscle I've been clenching since I was 11. I don't hate Janine. Hate takes maintenance I'm not willing to provide. I just don't make room for her anymore. Not in my house, not in my head, not in the refrigerator. Ruth and I have dinner every Sunday. She's 72 and still tends her tomato garden. She still asks, "How was your day?" every time I call. She still tapes things to her refrigerator. Last month it was a thank you card I gave her. No reason. Just because. I work at the clinic. I file charts. I help parents check in their kids. Sometimes a mother walks in looking overwhelmed and tired and scared, and I give her a warm smile and say, "Take your time. We're in no rush." Because I know what it looks like when a child is watching to see if the adults around them are paying attention. Ruth once told me, "Boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They're doors where you hold the key." I think about that a lot. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, if you were the child in the dark house, or if you're the adult still afraid of being called selfish for saying no, I want to tell you something. It's the same thing Mrs. Whitfield told me the day she knelt beside me in a nurse's office with a juice box and a question I'd been waiting my entire life for someone to ask. You don't have to protect anyone right now. Just tell the truth. My refrigerator is full. My phone works. My door has a lock that only I control. I am 24 years old and I am finally, completely, home. That's my story. I didn't tell it for pity. I told it because silence is what people like Janine count on. And I'm done being quiet. If this reached you, hit like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've ever had to draw a boundary with someone who called it betrayal, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. There's another story waiting for you in the description, about a girl whose family tried to erase her from a wedding, and what happened when she showed up anyway. I'll see you there. "What kind of worthless junk did you give me?" my father said, and then he slapped me, in front of 30 guests holding champagne glasses, on the night of his 55th birthday, in a house I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees since sunrise. I ran out the front door with nothing but a backpack and a bruise on my cheek. I didn't know it then, but that slap was the last thing Gerald Talbot would ever do to me. Because by midnight, I'd be sitting in a black SUV across from a stranger who'd say 5 words that would unravel 18 years of lies. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. My name is Hillary. Though for most of my life, I was forced to answer to Allison. I'm 21. Now, let me take you back to that Saturday morning, the day Gerald Talbot turned 55, and the last day I spent under his roof. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. that morning, same as every Saturday. Except this Saturday came with a 2-page handwritten list Donna had left on the kitchen counter the night before. Sweep the patio. Arrange the folding chairs, 32 of them, one for each guest on Gerald's list. Press the tablecloth. Slice the lemons. Wash the Pottery Barn serving platters by hand because the dishwasher leaves spots. Their house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Henrico County, Virginia, a 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn Gerald hired someone to mow, but told the neighbors I did. Inside, the dining table was solid oak, seats 12, polished weekly by me. On the counter, 2 cases of Napa Valley Cabernet and a 3-tier cake from a bakery that charged more for fondant than I earned in a week. My room was downstairs, not the finished basement, the storage closet next to the water heater. no window. A twin mattress Gerald had pulled from a curbside pile when I was 9. A wool blanket that smelled like damp cardboard no matter how many times I washed it. Megan's room was upstairs. Queen bed, flat screen, a vanity mirror ringed with those Hollywood bulbs. She was 23 and still lived at home. Still had her credit card linked to Gerald's account. Still hadn't learned how to boil an egg because that was what I was for. I'd spent 3 months saving for Gerald's gift. A leather wallet, real leather, from a department store downtown. $84, which doesn't sound like much unless you're earning $11 an hour scrubbing sheet pans at a restaurant called Rosie's off Route 1. I wrapped it in craft paper because I couldn't afford a gift bag. I didn't know, standing there in that kitchen at 5 in the morning with flour on my hands, that the wallet would be the last thing I ever gave that man. Gerald came downstairs at 10. Polo shirt. Ralph Lauren, the one with the big pony logo. Powder blue. Khakis creased like knife edges, cologne so thick it reached me before he did. He walked the patio like a general inspecting his troops, moved one balloon cluster 6 inches to the left, stared at the lemon slices I'd arranged on the water pitcher and said, without looking at me, "They're uneven. Do them again." Donna appeared at noon. Hair blown out, pearl studs, a linen dress from Ann Taylor she'd ordered online and made me steam. She inspected the kitchen, ran a finger along the countertop, and whispered something to Gerald I wasn't supposed to hear but did. "She only got you something cheap. Just brace yourself." Megan showed up last, because of course she did. New dress, new highlights, new heels clicking across the floor I'd waxed at 6 a.m. She handed Gerald an Apple Watch, the Series 9, stainless steel, the one that retails for $700. She'd charged it to the supplementary credit card Gerald gave her for emergencies. Gerald opened it, beamed, and kissed her forehead. "This is my girl," he told the first guests walking through the door. He had his arm around Megan. "She always knows what her old man likes." He didn't look at me. He never did when other people were watching. I was the girl who carried trays, refilled glasses, wiped condensation rings off the coffee table before they could set. When one of the guests, a woman from Gerald's office, asked Donna, "Shouldn't Allison sit down and eat with us?" Donna smiled the way she always smiled, warm as a closed door, and said, "Oh, she likes to help. It's her way of showing gratitude. You know how it is with adopted ones." I kept carrying trays. It happened during the gift opening. Gerald sat at the head of the table like it was a throne. 30 guests arranged around him. Neighbors, church friends, a few co-workers from the insurance agency he managed. Champagne flutes catching the patio string lights. Megan perched on the armrest of his chair, filming on her iPhone. Donna stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, radiating the image of a woman who had everything figured out. I came forward with the craft paper package. I'd written on the front in my neatest handwriting, "Happy birthday." "Allison." Gerald took it, weighed it in his hand. I remember thinking he might actually smile. He smiled sometimes, when no one could accuse him of going soft. But then he tore the paper, pulled out the wallet, flipped it open, flipped it closed, and held it up like evidence at trial. "What kind of worthless junk did you give me?" His voice cut through the chatter. Conversation stopped. Forks paused midair. Someone set down a glass too carefully. I started to explain. "I saved up for 3 months." 3 months, and this is all you got?" He stood. The chair scraped the flagstone. "Even the dog gets better treats." And then he hit me. Open palm, right across the left side of my face. The sound was sharp and flat, the kind that doesn't echo because it doesn't need to. My head snapped sideways. A champagne flute fell off the table and shattered on the patio floor, and for a second that was the only sound in the world. No one moved. Donna looked down at her plate. A man from Gerald's office studied his napkin. Megan bit her lip and kept filming. One person stood. Ruth Kessler, the next-door neighbor, 70 years old and 5 feet tall. "Gerald, that was uncalled for. Stay out of my family business." Ruth sat back down, but she didn't look away from me, and I have never forgotten that. I stood there with the taste of copper on my tongue and a wallet on the ground between us, and I thought, that slap will be the best evidence the lawyers need. I didn't understand that thought yet. I wouldn't understand it for hours, but something inside me had already started counting. I didn't go back to the party. I went to the storage closet, pulled the Jansport backpack off the nail on the wall. Faded navy, fraying at the zipper, the only thing that had followed me from high school, and packed what I could. 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans without holes, a toothbrush, a phone charger. The envelope I'd found in the bottom of a box Gerald threw out last spring, the one with a state logo I didn't understand yet, and from inside a shoebox under my mattress, $340 in cash, mostly 1s and 5s, tip money from Rosie's that I'd hidden because Gerald checked my bank account, $340, a backpack, a bruise already blooming purple on my cheekbone. That was everything I owned in this world. I walked through the living room on my way out. The party had resumed. Gerald was laughing at something someone said, champagne in hand, the wallet nowhere in sight. Megan was showing guests something on her phone, probably the video. Donna stood at the window and watched me cross the front yard. She reached for the curtain and pulled it shut. Nobody called my name. Outside, the October air hit my face and the sting on my cheek flared like a second slap. Henrico County at 9 p.m. is dark. Not city dark, where there's always a bodega lit up on the next corner, but suburb dark, where the streetlights are spaced far apart and the silence between houses feels deliberate. I walked along Patterson Avenue. No destination, just a way. Behind me, the music from the party got softer and softer until it was just bass notes and then nothing at all. I'd made it maybe 2 miles when headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade, clean tinted windows, Virginia plates. It rolled to a stop 10 feet ahead. The rear door opened. And I should have run. Every instinct said run. But I was already so tired of running from things, I thought. Maybe just this once, I'd see what was running toward me. A man stepped out first. Mid-50s, tall, lean, wearing a charcoal peacoat I'd later learn was Brooks Brothers. Not flashy, just the kind of coat that fits like someone measured you for it. His hair was dark brown threaded with silver. And his eyes, hazel green, wide set, catching the streetlight, were the exact same eyes I saw in my bathroom mirror every morning. Behind him, a woman. Shorter, red-haired, sharp-featured, carrying a leather portfolio like she'd just left a courtroom. She kept her distance, professional, watchful. The man's hands were trembling. I could see that even in the dark. "I'm sorry to frighten you," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. "My name is Richard Whitford, and I believe I am your biological father." I took a step back. My shoulders hit a mailbox post. That's not possible. My biological parents didn't want me, that's what I was told. You were told wrong. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a photograph. Small, creased at the corners, clearly handled 1,000 times. A woman holding a toddler. The woman had auburn hair and cheekbones like mine, and a smile that leaned slightly to the left. The toddler had hazel green eyes. "Her name was Catherine," he said. "She was your mother. She died in a car accident when you were 2, and I have spent every single day since then trying to find you." I looked at the photograph, then at him, then at the photograph again, because the woman in it had the same mouth I did, the same tilt of the head, and looking at her felt like finding a word you've been searching for your whole life. The red-haired woman spoke. "My name is Margaret Hale. I'm Mr. Whitford's attorney, specializing in family law. We're not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. We've been monitoring your situation through legal channels for several months. Tonight, when our investigators saw you leave the house, we made the decision to approach." "You were watching the house?" Margaret nodded. "The birthday party. Many guests. It was the safest opportunity to confirm your identity visually." She paused. "We also saw you run." I touched my cheek without thinking. The bruise pulsed under my fingertips. Richard Whitford looked at the mark on my face, and something behind his eyes broke very quietly. We sat in the back of the Escalade. Richard on one side, me on the other, Margaret in the front passenger seat with her portfolio open. The engine was running, the heat on low. It was the warmest I'd been all night. Richard told me the story like a man who'd rehearsed it for 18 years and still wasn't ready. Catherine died on I-64 eastbound on a Tuesday morning in March. A delivery truck crossed the median. She was killed instantly. Richard was in the passenger seat. Shattered pelvis, collapsed lung, 4 months in the hospital. Hillary, me, was at home with a neighbor. While I was in the ICU, he said, Child Protective Services placed you in emergency foster care. Standard procedure when there's no available parent. I understood that. What I didn't understand was why, when I got out of the hospital and filed to bring you home, they told me I couldn't. A social worker named Leonard Grubb handled the case. Grubb told the family court that Richard had signed a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, a legal document surrendering custody permanently. Grubb presented the court with a signed form. The judge approved the adoption. I never signed anything, Richard said. I was on a ventilator. I couldn't hold a pen, let alone read a legal document, but the court had a piece of paper with my name on it, and that was enough. By the time Richard hired a lawyer and challenged the ruling, it was too late. The adoption had been finalized. The file was sealed. His daughter had a new name, a new family, a new life somewhere in Virginia that he wasn't allowed to know about. So I hired investigators, he said. Year after year. It doesn't matter what I spent. I would have spent everything. His voice didn't waver when he talked about the money. It wavered when he said the word, everything. Leonard Grubb, I said. How much did they pay him? Richard looked at Margaret. Margaret closed her portfolio and said, That's what we intend to prove in court. The SUV was still parked on Patterson Avenue, hazard lights blinking amber against the dark. I sat with my backpack on my lap, clutching the straps like a kid on the first day of school, and I told them about the envelope. Last spring, Gerald had decided Megan needed a yoga studio in the house. That meant clearing the storage closet, my room, and moving my things to an even smaller corner by the furnace. He threw most of my belongings into a garbage bag and tossed it by the curb. I went through the bag before the trash truck came, because that's what you learn to do when nothing you own is safe. You check, and you save what you can. At the bottom of a water-damaged cardboard box, underneath old report cards and a Ziploc bag of baby clothes, I found a manila envelope. Official-looking. The return address had a seal and the words, Virginia Department of Social Services. Inside was a single document, partially redacted, with the heading, Title IV, E-Adoption Assistance, Monthly Disbursement Summary. And across the top, typed in plain government font, Allison G. Talbot. I didn't know what Title IV-E was. I didn't know what a disbursement summary meant. But I knew my name was on a government document that Gerald had never shown me, so I folded it up and put it in my backpack. I'd been carrying it for 6 months without understanding why. I pulled it out now and handed it to Margaret. She unfolded it under the dome light, and I watched her expression change. Not dramatically, but the way a poker player's face changes when the final card flips. This is the adoption subsidy record, she said. The state of Virginia has been paying Gerald and Donna Talbot approximately $810 per month for your care and maintenance, for 18 years. She looked at me. That's roughly $175,000. How much of it did you ever see? I thought of the mattress from the curb, the blanket that smelled like cardboard, the closet with no window. None, I said. Richard turned his face toward the window, and in the reflection of the glass I could see him pressing his jaw shut so hard the muscle jumped. All those years, I said, half to myself, he called me a burden. But I wasn't a burden. I was a paycheck. Margaret drove us to a Hilton off Broad Street. Not the Talbot house, not a shelter. Just somewhere clean and quiet and safe. Richard checked us in under his name. Separate rooms, adjoining door, and the first thing I did was stand in the middle of mine and not know what to do. The bed had white sheets that smelled like detergent instead of mildew. There was a window. I opened the curtains and just looked out at the parking lot lights for a long time, because looking out a window from my own room was something I hadn't done in years. While I stood there, the memories came in layers, the way water rises, steady and cold. I started cooking the family meals when I was 10. Gerald said it was to teach me responsibility. By 12, I was doing all the laundry, all the dishes, all the grocery shopping on foot because Gerald wouldn't drive me. Megan got a Toyota Camry for her 16th birthday. I got a bus pass that expired after 1 month because nobody renewed it, so I walked an hour and a half to Rosie's for my shifts. Gerald never let me keep my own documents. No birth certificate, no social security card, no state ID. When I asked for a driver's license at 17, he said, "What for? You don't have anywhere to go." At the time, I thought he was right. Now I understood he'd designed it that way. I kept thinking, why did Gerald keep me all those years if he despised me? Why not just send me back into the system? If I was so worthless, why hold on? Now I had the answer. $810 a month. That's why. Have you ever met someone who hated you but refused to let you leave? Someone who made you feel like garbage but held on to you like you were gold? If you have, tell me in the comments. Because I think you already know what that math looks like. Donna's voice echoed in my head the way it always did, sweet and sharp as lemon juice on a cut. Gratitude, Allison. That's all we've ever asked for. Is that really so hard? No, Donna. What was hard was realizing I'd been grateful to people who were stealing from me. Let me go back 2 weeks. Before the party. Before the slap. Before any of this. Because the truth is, Gerald had already shown me who he was. I just didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. It was a Tuesday evening. Gerald called me into his home office, the room no one entered without permission. Mahogany desk, leather wingback chair, a shelf of hardcover books he'd never read, arranged by color. He was sitting behind the desk like a judge, a manila folder open in front of him. "Sit down," he said. "Not have a seat. Sit down." He pushed a document across the desk. 10, maybe 12 pages, dense print, a blue signature tab sticking out from the bottom. "This is a voluntary agreement," he said. "It states that you choose to remain under my guardianship because you are not financially or emotionally prepared to live independently. Sign it." I picked it up. Most of the language was impenetrable, whereas the dependent acknowledges that independent living presents undue financial and psychological risk. But one clause on page 4 I understood perfectly. The agreement authorized Gerald to continue managing all state and federal benefits associated with the dependent's care. He wanted me to sign over my own subsidy. Again, this time voluntarily, with my adult signature, so he could keep collecting even after I aged out of the system. "Why do I need to sign this?" I asked. Gerald's expression didn't change. "Because without this family, you're on the street. You don't have a degree. You don't have savings. You don't even have an ID. So you're going to sign this, and you're going to sign it before my birthday. Consider it your gift to me." I didn't sign. I asked for more time. Gerald said nothing, just closed the folder and placed it back in the desk drawer. Slowly, the way you put a loaded gun in a safe. That's why he hit me at the party. It wasn't about the wallet. It was never about the wallet. It was because I'd told him no for the first time in 18 years and he couldn't stand it. Back at the Hilton, the morning after. I woke up at 5 a.m. out of habit, heart pounding, already running through the chore list in my head before I remembered. There was no list. There was just a hotel room with white sheets and a window full of gray October sky. A knock on the adjoining door. Richard, already dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee from the lobby. He set one on the desk and sat in the chair across the room. Not close, not far, just present. Like he was afraid that if he moved too fast, I'd disappear again. Margaret arrived at 8 with a garment bag. Inside, a pair of new jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, still tagged. "Something clean to wear?" she said, practical as always. I took them into the bathroom and put them on and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. It was the first time in my life I was wearing something that no one else had worn first. When I came out, Richard's eyes went red at the edges, but he didn't cry. He just nodded and said, "Catherine had that same look, like she was deciding whether to trust the mirror." I sat on the edge of the bed and said what I'd been thinking all night. I need proof. Not the photo, not the story. I need a DNA test. If you're who you say you are, the science will back it up. And if you're not, I need to know that too. Richard didn't flinch. Of course. Margaret's already located an AABB-accredited lab in Richmond. We can go today. No hesitation, no offense, no guilt trip. Just of course. I'd spent 21 years in a house where asking a question was treated as a personal attack. And here was a man who answered like questions were the most natural thing in the world. "I've spent my whole life doing what I was told," I said. "If I'm going to trust you, it'll be because I chose to, not because I had nowhere else to go." Richard set down his coffee. "That's exactly how it should be." The lab was a low brick building off Carey Street, clean, clinical, fluorescent. A technician in scrubs swabbed the inside of my cheek, then Richard's, labeled the vials, and told us results would take 3 to 5 business days. 5 days. I'd waited 21 years to know who I was. 5 more felt like holding my breath underwater. While we waited, Richard brought things to the hotel. Not gifts, not the way Gerald gave gifts, as transactions with strings attached, but pieces. An album of photographs. Catherine pregnant, laughing on a porch swing, one hand on her belly. Catherine holding a newborn with a pink hat. Richard and Catherine and the baby in front of a brick bungalow in Richmond's fan district with a red door. The baby had hazel green eyes, even then. "That's the house you came home to," Richard said. "I still own it. I couldn't bring myself to sell it." I studied each photograph like it was a document I needed to memorize for a test. My mother's face, her hands, the way she stood, slightly tilted, weight on her left foot, the same way I stand when I'm not thinking about it. "She's beautiful," I said. "You look exactly like her," he said, "especially the eyes." On the 5th day, Margaret called. I was sitting on the hotel bed with the album open to a photo of Catherine blowing out birthday candles when my phone rang. 99.998% probability of paternity, Margaret said. "It's confirmed. Richard Whitford is your biological father." I didn't say anything for a while. I just held the phone and looked at the photograph and felt something crack open in my chest. Not break, not shatter, but open, the way a door opens when someone finally turns the handle from the other side. 99.998%, a number. But for me, it was the first proof in 21 years that I wasn't an accident nobody wanted. Margaret's voice came back on the line, steady and precise. "Now, we have enough. The next step is family court." Here's what I learned later. From the court filings, from Ruth Kessler's testimony, from the texts Donna would eventually hand over to Margaret. The morning after the party, Gerald called the Henrico County Police and reported me missing. Not because he was worried, because he was calculating. The officer who responded ran my information and told Gerald what he didn't want to hear. I was 21, a legal adult. If I'd left voluntarily, there was no missing persons case to open. "She didn't leave voluntarily," Gerald told the officer. "She's mentally unfit. She can barely function without supervision." The officer asked if Gerald had any documentation of that. A diagnosis, a guardianship order, anything legal. Gerald didn't, because I wasn't mentally unfit. I was just controlled. That night, according to Donna's texts, the ones she'd later surrender as evidence, Gerald paced the living room for 3 hours. Donna sat on the couch and typed what he dictated. "Gerald, if that girl talks to anyone, CPS, a lawyer, anyone, we're done. Find the adoption file. All of it. The originals." Donna, "You said she doesn't know anything." Gerald, "She doesn't. But if someone shows her where to look." He knew. He'd always known. The forged signature, the bribed caseworker, The subsidy he'd been collecting for 18 years on a child he treated like hired help. Gerald carried all of it in his head the way some men carry debt. Constantly aware, constantly managing, never once considering that the whole structure might collapse. Gerald wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of what I'd find out once I was free. He didn't know that the man he should have been afraid of, the man who'd spent 18 years and a private investigator's retainer trying to find his daughter, was sitting in a Hilton 20 minutes away, assembling a file 3 inches thick. Margaret spread the documents across the hotel desk like a surgeon laying out instruments. This was the second time I saw the evidence. But this time, it had teeth. "Look at this," she said, sliding a photocopied form toward me. It was the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, dated October 2005. At the bottom, a signature, Richard A. Whitford. Neat, deliberate, slightly forward-leaning. Then she placed a second sheet beside it, a certified report from a forensic document examiner, Dr. Elaine Marsh, who had compared the signature on the relinquishment form to 12 known exemplars of Richard's handwriting. Tax returns, mortgage applications, business contracts spanning 20 years. "The pen pressure is inconsistent," Margaret said, pointing. "The letter formation in the surname doesn't match any of the exemplars." Dr. Marsh's conclusion, and I'm quoting, is that the signature was produced by a hand other than that of Richard A. Whitford with a high degree of certainty. She let that settle. Then she pulled a third document from the file, a bank record. A personal checking account belonging to Leonard Grubb, the social worker who had handled my case. On October 14th, 2005, 6 days before the adoption was finalized, a deposit of $5,000 appeared. The source, a wire transfer from Gerald R. Talbot's personal account. "Not through the church," Margaret said. "Not through a charity. Direct, account to account, 1 week before the adoption was approved." I stared at the numbers. $5,000. That's what my entire identity had cost. My name, my father, my childhood, traded for the price of a used car. Richard sat across the room, arms folded, jaw tight. He'd seen these documents before, but watching me see them, that was something different. I could tell by the way he breathed, shallow and careful, like a man trying not to break something by holding it too hard. "So the adoption can be undone?" I asked. Margaret closed the file. "Under Virginia law, an adoption procured through fraud, including forged consent, can be declared void. Yes, it can be undone." 2 days before the court date, a letter arrived at the Hilton's front desk, addressed to me, Allison Talbot, not Hillary Whitford, because Gerald still refused to believe I had any other name. Inside, a single page on Gerald's insurance agency letterhead, handwritten, and a photograph. Me, at 3 years old, sitting on Gerald's lap in the living room of the house on the cul-de-sac, wearing a pink dress I don't remember owning. He was smiling. I was smiling. It looked like a family. The letter read, "Allison, I don't know who this man is or what he's told you, but he is not your father. He is a stranger exploiting a confused young woman. We are your family. We have been your family for 18 years. Come home. We can work this out. I forgive you for leaving." Dad, I read it 3 times. The word forgive hit me differently each time. First like a door opening, then like a lock clicking shut, then like a hand gripping my wrist. He forgave me. For leaving. After he hit me. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and felt the room tilt. 18 years of conditioning doesn't shut off because a DNA test says 99.998%. Somewhere inside me, a voice I'd carried since childhood whispered, "What if Gerald's right? What if this is all a trick? What if Richard just wants something from you too?" I looked at Richard, who was reading in the chair by the window, and said, "How do I know you're not the same as him? How do I know you won't just use me for something else?" He put the book down. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a man who understood exactly why I was asking. "You don't," he said. "Not yet. And I'm not going to try to convince you with words, because words are cheap. The DNA doesn't lie. The documents don't lie. And the court will decide what's true. All I'm asking is that you let the evidence speak." He picked up his book again and went back to reading. And that, the not pushing, the giving me room, was the thing that scared me most, because it was so different from everything I knew. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always did when the world stopped making sense. I looked at the evidence. I took the Title IV-E envelope from my backpack and set it on the desk beside Gerald's letter. 2 documents. One from the state of Virginia, confirming that Gerald received $810 a month to take care of me. One from Gerald claiming he was my family. If Gerald loved me, why did I sleep in a storage closet? If Gerald loved me, why didn't I have a birth certificate, a social security card, a single piece of identification with my name on it? If Gerald loved me, why was the guardianship extension he'd tried to make me sign designed to keep the subsidy flowing, not to keep me safe? The answer was in the math. It had always been in the math. Gerald didn't love me. Gerald invoiced me. I called Margaret at 11 p.m. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she'd been expecting this call. "I'm going to court," I said. "Not because I trust Richard, not fully, not yet, but because I deserve to know the truth. I've earned that. That's all we need," she said. The next afternoon, Derek Simmons came to the hotel. Mid-40s, square-jawed, serious. A social worker with the Virginia Department of Social Services, assigned to review Richard's petition. He asked me about my living conditions growing up. I told him about the closet, the chores, the missing documents, the isolation. He wrote everything down in a small notebook, and when I finished, he didn't say "I'm sorry," or "that must have been hard." He said, "What you're describing, if it's corroborated by the records, constitutes neglect, and the financial component constitutes exploitation of adoption assistance funds." Then he looked at me and added more quietly, "This isn't just about your adoption being fraudulent, Ms. Whitford. This is about a system that was supposed to protect you and didn't." "I'm not choosing Richard over Gerald," I told myself as Derek left. "I'm choosing the truth over the lie I've been living." I didn't witness this part directly. It came out later, piece by piece, through Donna's testimony and the texts she turned over. But I'll tell it the way it happened, because you need to understand who Gerald thought he was walking into that courtroom to face. The night before the hearing, Gerald sat at the dining room table, the same oak table I'd polished every week for 18 years, and rehearsed his testimony with his lawyer. Not Margaret's caliber of lawyer, a general practitioner from a strip mall office who charged by the half hour and had never handled an adoption fraud case in his life. "I have all the paperwork," Gerald said. "Signed, sealed, stamped by the court. I've been a member of First Baptist for 22 years. I coach Little League. Everyone in this community knows who I am." Donna, sitting across from him, ventured a question. "What about the subsidy envelope? What if they ask about the money?" Gerald didn't look up. "Nobody audits that. We're fine." Megan wandered through on her way to the kitchen and asked, her voice bored, incurious, the voice of someone whose biggest problem was a slow Wi-Fi connection. "If Allison doesn't come back, can I turn her room into a walk-in closet?" Gerald didn't answer her either. He was already drafting his opening statement in his head, the one where he'd stand before a judge and explain what a generous, God-fearing man he was for taking in a child nobody else wanted. He didn't know that the judge would be looking at a 3-inch file of forged signatures, bribery records, and a forensic examiner's report. He didn't know that the girl he'd raised to be silent had finally found her voice. He didn't know that the man sitting across the aisle would be the father whose name someone had forged 18 years ago. Gerald walked into that courtroom like a man who had never lost. He was about to learn what losing looked like. The morning of the hearing, Margaret turned the hotel conference room into a war room. She'd reserved a table for 6 and covered it with 5 stacks of documents, each flagged with colored tabs. I sat at one end with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands, and she walked me through the case the way a general walks through a battle plan. Calm, precise, leaving nothing to chance. "Stack 1, she said, tapping the first pile. "DNA results. AABB accredited lab, Chain of custody documented, 99.998% probability. Irrefutable. Stack 2. The forensic handwriting analysis from Dr. Elaine Marsh. The signature on the relinquishment form is not Richard's. Her report is 46 pages, but the conclusion is one sentence. Stack 3. Financial records obtained through our petition to the Virginia Department of Social Services. Gerald and Donna Talbot received $810 per month in Title IV adoption assistance for approximately 216 months. Total, $174,960. Derek Simmons's assessment confirms the funds were not used for your welfare. Stack 4. Derek's full report. Child neglect findings. No medical records after age 14. No personal identification documents in your possession. Living conditions inconsistent with the purpose of adoption assistance. Stack 5. She paused. A sworn declaration from Ruth Kessler, your former neighbor. She's agreed to testify that she witnessed ongoing patterns of unequal treatment and that she personally observed Gerald strike you at the birthday party. Ruth, 70 years old, 5 feet tall, the only person in that backyard who'd stood up. I hadn't spoken to her since that night, but she'd spoken to Margaret, and she hadn't hesitated. Do I have to say anything in court? I asked. Margaret looked at me. Only if you want to. The paperwork speaks for itself. Richard, sitting at the far end of the table, hadn't said a word through the entire briefing. Now he spoke, just once. Whatever happens in there, you already won. You're free. I looked at the 5 stacks on the table. A lifetime of lies, dismantled into tabbed folders. And I thought, no, I haven't won yet. But I'm about to. Richard took me to Banana Republic that afternoon. Not because the clothes mattered, but because, he said, you should walk into that room looking exactly like who you are. Someone who deserves to be heard. I tried on a navy blazer, a white silk blouse, charcoal slacks. Stood in front of the fitting room mirror and stared at the person looking back. She had straight shoulders and clear eyes and looked like someone who might sit at a conference table, not carry trays to one. Your mother used to do that, Richard said when I came out. He was leaning against the wall outside the fitting rooms, hands in his coat pockets. Stand in front of the mirror for a long time, then she'd smile at herself. Just a little, like she'd settled something. I hadn't smiled, but I understood what he meant. Something was settling. On the drive back, Richard pointed to a brick bungalow on a tree-lined street in the Fan District. Red front door, white shutters, a porch swing hanging still in the October air. That's the house, he said, the one in the photos. I looked at it through the window. The house I'd been born into, the house I'd been taken from, and I didn't feel the ache I expected. I felt something quieter, a kind of recognition that sits in the body instead of the mind. That night, the night before the hearing, I sat on the hotel bed and wrote in a notebook I'd bought at the CVS across the street. Not a speech, not a plan, just a line, for myself. No matter what happens tomorrow, I will never go back to that storage room. I will never answer to a name that isn't mine. I will never again be grateful for being used. I slept 4 hours. I dreamed of a red front door opening. Richmond Family Court. A Tuesday morning in late October. The building was old federal brick, columned entrance, hallway floors that echoed every footstep like the building wanted you to know who was coming. I arrived at 8:30 with Richard on my left and Margaret on my right, Derek Simmons a few steps behind carrying a banker's box of records. Navy blazer, white blouse, hair pulled back in a low knot. No jewelry, I didn't own any, but my hands were steady and my back was straight. Gerald arrived at 8:40. Gray suit, burgundy tie, Donna on his arm in her Ann Taylor dress, Megan trailing behind in something too casual for court. His lawyer carried a single file folder. Gerald carried his chin at the angle of a man who believed this was a formality. Then he saw us. His eyes went to me first, registered the blazer, the posture, the absence of the girl who used to stare at the floor. Then they moved to Richard. Then to Margaret. Then to the banker's box Derek was setting on the plaintiff's table. Gerald's face didn't crumble. It recalibrated. I'd seen that look before. The rapid mental arithmetic of a man who controls every variable suddenly realizing there's one he missed. Donna's hand tightened on his arm. Megan pulled out her phone, then thought better of it and put it away. Gerald and I made eye contact across the hallway. For the first time in my life, I didn't look down. The clerk opened the courtroom doors and called the case. In the matter of the adoption of the minor formerly known as Hilary Whitford, now styled Allison Grace Talbot. We walked in, both sides, the same door, different worlds. Margaret stood the way I imagined a scalpel would stand if it could. Upright, precise, reflecting light. She addressed the judge, the Honorable Patricia Dwyer, without notes. Your Honor, we are here today to present evidence that the adoption of Hilary Whitford, known for the past 18 years as Allison Grace Talbot, was obtained through fraud. Specifically, the forging of a biological parent's consent to relinquish parental rights, facilitated by a financial payment to the case-assigned social worker. She presented the DNA results first, the lab technician's sworn affidavit, the chain of custody, the number, 99.998%. Judge Dwyer examined the report, adjusted her reading glasses, and set it aside with a small nod. Then Margaret introduced the forensic handwriting analysis, Dr. Elaine Marsh's 46-page report, condensed to its final paragraph. It is my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that the signature on the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights dated October 2005 was not produced by Richard A. Whitford. Gerald's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has a legally executed adoption decree, approved by this court system nearly 2 decades ago. The petitioner is attempting to relitigate a settled matter based on a hired expert's opinion. Margaret didn't turn around. Your Honor, a decree built on a forged signature is not settled. It is concealed. We are here to unconceal it. I heard Ruth Kessler shift in the gallery behind me. A man I didn't recognize. Later I'd learn he was a courthouse reporter for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, wrote something in a narrow notebook. 2 women from Gerald's church sat in the second row, their faces tight with the particular discomfort of people watching a reputation disassemble in real time. Judge Dwyer looked at Gerald's lawyer over her glasses. The court will hear the petitioner's full presentation. Continue, Ms. Hale. Margaret moved to the financial records, and this was where the air in the courtroom changed. She projected the Title IV disbursement summary onto the courtroom screen, the same document I'd pulled from a garbage bag 6 months ago. Month by month, year by year, a column of numbers running down the page like a ledger of my childhood. Mr. Talbot, Margaret said, the judge had permitted direct questioning. The state of Virginia paid your household $810 per month in adoption assistance for the care of the child placed with you. Over approximately 18 years, that totals $174,960. Can you tell the court how those funds were allocated toward the child's welfare? Gerald straightened in his chair. Everything went to the girl. We fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head. 18 years of that isn't cheap. Margaret nodded as though she'd expected this answer, which she had. Then she called Derek Simmons. Derek approached the stand carrying his report like a man carrying something heavy and important. He'd visited the Talbot home. He'd reviewed the records. He spoke without inflection, which made every fact land harder. The child's living space was a converted storage area adjacent to the home's water heater. Approximately 60 square feet, no exterior window, no closet. The mattress showed visible wear and water damage consistent with curbside salvage. I found no medical records for the child after age 14, no pediatric visits, no dental records, no immunizations after 8th grade. The child had no state-issued identification, no social security card in her possession, and no documented access to her own adoption file. He looked at the judge. In my professional assessment, Your Honor, the living conditions described and observed are consistent with child neglect, not with the intended purpose of adoption assistance funds. Donna started crying. Softly at first, then louder. The performed kind of crying that draws eyes. Gerald squeezed her hand and set his jaw, projecting the image of a husband protecting a fragile wife from unfair accusations. But Ruth Kessler was next. She took the stand in a navy cardigan and sensible flats, and she didn't perform anything. "I've lived next to that family for 12 years, Ruth said. "I watched that girl mow their lawn, wash their cars, hang laundry in the backyard while the other daughter, the biological one, sunbathed on a lounge chair. I never once saw Allison, Hillary, sit at their dinner table when guests were present. And on the night of Mr. Talbot's birthday, I watched him strike her across the face in front of 30 people because she gave him a gift he thought was beneath him." The courtroom was quiet in the way a room is quiet when everyone in it is recalculating what they thought they knew. Margaret waited for Ruth to step down, then turned back to Gerald. "Mr. Talbot, do you know a man named Leonard Grubb?" Gerald didn't blink. "No." Margaret produced a photograph, printed on glossy stock, date stamped in the corner. 2 men standing at a folding table at an outdoor event. One was Gerald, 10 years younger, polo shirt, paper plate in hand. The other was a thin man with glasses and a Virginia DSS lanyard around his neck. This was taken at the First Baptist Church community picnic in June 2004, Margaret said. "1 year before the adoption was finalized. The man beside you is Leonard Grubb, the social worker assigned to Hillary Whitford's case. Do you still maintain you don't know him?" Gerald's jaw worked. "I may have met him in passing. Church events are large. I don't remember every face." "You remember well enough to send him $5,000. Margaret placed the bank statement on the projector. Gerald's personal checking account. October 14th, 2005. Wire transfer. Recipient: Leonard M. Grubb. Can you explain this payment?" "That was a donation. For the church's... It was a community contribution." "Routed from your personal account directly to Mr. Grubb's personal account? Not the church's account?" Gerald turned to his lawyer, who was studying the table surface with the intensity of a man hoping to find an exit there. No objection came. "I gave that girl everything." Gerald's voice cracked upward, sharp as a slap. He was standing now, one hand flat on the table. 18 years, a home, food, and this is the thanks I get? Some con man shows up and suddenly I'm the villain? "Mr. Talbot." Judge Dwyer's voice was low and final. "Sit down, now." He sat, but the room had already heard it, the mask cracking, the entitlement spilling through. In the gallery, the church women stared at their laps. The courthouse reporter's pen moved faster. Margaret turned to the judge with the composure of someone who had just watched her opponent do her job for her. "Your Honor, we'd like the court to note Mr. Talbot's characterization of his parental role as something he gave and expects repayment for. That is not parenting. That is a transaction." Margaret looked at me. I'd told her the night before, "I want to speak. Not because the case needed it. The documents were enough. But because I'd been silent for 21 years and some things need to be said by the person who lived them." "Your Honor, the petitioner's daughter would like to address the court if permitted." Judge Dwyer nodded. "You may proceed." I stood. Navy blazer, white blouse, hands at my sides. I looked at the judge, not at Gerald, because this wasn't for him. "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge." The word sat in the air for a moment, and I let it. "I'm here because for 21 years I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my own name. I didn't know my mother's face. I didn't know that someone was looking for me, or that the papers that put me in that house were built on a forged signature." I paused, breathed. "Mr. Talbot said he gave me everything. Here's what everything looked like. A storage closet with no window. A mattress from someone's curb. No doctor visits after age 14. No identification. No birth certificate. I didn't know my own social security number until 2 weeks ago. I worked in that house from the time I was 8 years old, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, and I was told every day that I should be grateful for it, that without them, I was nothing." My voice didn't break. I'd decided it wouldn't. "He slapped me at his birthday party because I gave him a wallet I'd saved 3 months to buy. But the truth is, he slapped me because I wouldn't sign a paper giving him continued control over my life. That's what I was to him, not a daughter. A line item. I looked at the judge. I'm not asking this court to punish Gerald Talbot. I'm asking this court to tell the truth. Because I deserve at least that. Every child in the system deserves that. I sat down. The room was silent. Ruth Kessler was crying, quietly. The real kind. The courthouse reporter had stopped writing and was just looking at me. Richard sat perfectly still with his hands folded on the table, but I could see the knuckles white. When I stood in that courtroom, I remember thinking, why did it take me 21 years to say something this simple? Have you ever held something inside for so long that when you finally say it out loud, you're amazed it was only a few sentences? That all that weight could fit into so few words? If you know what that feels like, tell me in the comments, because I think that's the kind of thing you can't explain to someone who hasn't carried it. What happened next, no one expected. Least of all, Gerald. Donna stood up. Not from the witness stand. She hadn't been called. She stood from the respondent's bench, smoothed the front of her Ann Taylor dress the way she smoothed everything, and said, in a voice that shook like a wire about to snap, "Your Honor, I have something I need to say." Gerald grabbed her wrist. "Donna, sit down." She pulled free. It was the first time I'd ever seen her pull free of anything. "I wrote the check," Donna said. Her mascara was already running, but this wasn't the performed crying from earlier. This was different. Raw, ugly, the kind that doesn't care about an audience. $5,000 to Leonard Grubb. Gerald told me it was to expedite the adoption process. I wrote the check from our joint account, and I knew what it meant. Gerald's lawyer put his head in his hands. Gerald went red from the collar up, a deep mottled crimson I'd never seen on him before. "She's lying," Gerald said. "She's confused. She's trying to protect herself." "I am trying to protect myself." Donna's voice broke high and desperate. "Because I've been protecting you for 18 years, and I can't do it anymore. I watched you hit that girl. I watched you work her like a mule. And I didn't say anything because I was afraid of you, Gerald. I was afraid of exactly this." Judge Dwyer let her finish. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming above us. Megan sat frozen in the gallery, phone in her lap, mouth open. "Mr. Talbot," the judge said, and her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen a great deal and was still capable of being appalled. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Gerald sat still as stone, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look afraid. Judge Dwyer took 12 minutes to review the final documents. 12 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the courtroom wall, the old analog kind with a second hand that ticks instead of sweeps, and counted every rotation. When she looked up, she didn't address Gerald first. She addressed me. "Ms. Whitford," and I will use that name now, because the evidence before this court compels it. The court has reviewed the petition, the forensic handwriting analysis, the financial records, the testimony of the social worker and the neighbor witness, the DNA results, and the statement made voluntarily by Mrs. Talbot. She removed her glasses. The evidence is unambiguous. The voluntary relinquishment of parental rights filed in October 2005 bears a signature that has been determined, by certified forensic analysis, to be fraudulent. The biological father, Richard Whitford, never consented to the termination of his parental rights. The adoption that followed was therefore built on a foundation of forgery and, based on the financial evidence presented, facilitated by a direct payment to the case-assigned social worker. She turned to Gerald. He was sitting rigidly upright, tie still knotted, hands flat on the table. A man holding the posture of authority while the authority drained out of him. "It is the ruling of this court that the adoption of Hilary Whitford, styled as Allison Grace Talbot, is declared void ab initio. The adoption is annulled in its entirety." Gerald didn't move. Furthermore, the court orders Gerald and Donna Talbot to make full restitution of all Title IV adoption assistance funds received, totaling $174,960, to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Donna let out a sound that wasn't quite a word. Finally, this court is referring the matter to the Henrico County District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges, including but not limited to forgery in violation of Virginia Code Section 18.2-172, fraud in connection with public assistance, and child neglect under Section 18.2-371.1. The judge set down her papers. The child's legal name is restored to Hillary Whitford, effective immediately. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and the sound of it, that single wooden knock, was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my life. Louder than the slap. Louder than 18 years of silence. It sounded like a lock opening. In the gallery, Ruth Kessler pressed both hands to her mouth. The church women were already standing, gathering their purses, not making eye contact with each other. The courthouse reporter closed his notebook and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Something between respect and sadness. Gerald sat motionless. His lawyer was already packing up, and for the first time I realized that the man Gerald had hired to defend him couldn't get out of that room fast enough. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like floor wax and old radiator heat. I was walking toward the exit with Richard on one side and Margaret on the other when I heard the heels. Fast, uneven, the sound of someone not used to hurrying in shoes that weren't built for it. Wait. Megan. Her makeup was ruined. Mascara tracked down both cheeks. Foundation patchy where she'd wiped at it. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, which was strange because she'd always taken up so much space. I didn't know, she said. She was breathing hard, like she'd been running or trying not to. About the money, the subsidy. I thought Mom and Dad were paying for my school out of Dad's salary. I didn't know it was... She stopped. She couldn't finish the sentence, and I understood why. The sentence ended with your money, and saying it out loud would make it real in a way she wasn't ready for. I looked at her. The girl who'd gotten the Apple Watch, the Toyota Camry, the queen bed, the highlighted hair, the credit card that never declined. The girl who'd laughed when Gerald hit me and filmed it on her phone. The girl who'd asked if she could turn my closet into storage for her shoes. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to walk away without a word. But what I felt? Standing there in a courthouse hallway with my legal name restored and my actual father beside me, wasn't rage. It was clarity. I hope you figure out who you are without his money, Megan, I said. I really do. But that's your journey, not mine. She nodded once, and I saw something pass across her face. Not guilt exactly, but the beginning of it. The hairline fracture before the break. Margaret touched my arm lightly. Richard was holding the door open. I walked toward them and didn't look back. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time I had somewhere to walk toward instead of just away from. Gerald was standing at the bottom of the courthouse steps. He looked diminished. Not physically. He was still a big man, still broad in the shoulders, but something structural had given way. His tie was loosened. His suit jacket was unbuttoned. Donna sat in their Buick at the curb, forehead against the steering wheel, engine running. I was halfway down the steps when he said it. The name he'd assigned me 21 years ago, the name a judge had just struck from the record. Allison. I stopped, turned. He looked at me the way he always had, like I was something he owned and couldn't quite figure out the value of. But now there was something else underneath it. Something that might have been fear if Gerald Talbot were the kind of man who admitted to being afraid. After everything I did for you, he said, after 18 years under my roof, this is how you repay me. I stood on the steps in my navy blazer with October sunlight on my shoulders, and I felt, for the first time, the full weight of what he'd just said. Not anger. Recognition. Because even now, even with the judge's ruling still ringing in the air, even with a forensic report proving he'd forged a man's signature to steal that man's daughter, Gerald Talbot believed he was owed something. My name is Hillary, I said, and you didn't do anything for me. You did everything to me, and now it's over. I turned and walked down the remaining steps. Richard was waiting by the Escalade, door open. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just held the door the way you hold a door for someone you've been waiting 18 years to hold a door for. I got in. The door closed. And the last thing I saw through the tinted window was Gerald Talbot standing alone on the courthouse steps, suit jacket hanging open, watching his investment drive away. 6 months later. That's where I am now. I live in Richmond. Not the fan district house with the red door, though Richard offered it. I have an apartment off Gray Street, a studio with tall windows that let in so much morning light, I sometimes just stand there for a minute before starting my day. The windows were the first thing I looked for when I went apartment hunting. I spent 18 years in a room without one. Now I need to see the sky when I wake up. I'm studying for my GED. I'm also enrolled in the culinary program at Reynolds Community College, which is ironic, I know. Gerald made me cook every meal for 18 years, and now I'm choosing it. But that's the difference, isn't it? Between something done to you and something you decide to do. The ingredients are the same. The meaning is completely different. Richard and I have dinner every Sunday at the bungalow. He's not a great cook. His specialty is overcooked salmon and slightly burned garlic bread. But he makes it himself, and he sets the table for two, and he asks me about my week, and listens to the answer. We're not perfect. There are awkward silences. There are moments when neither of us knows what to say, because you can't recover 18 stolen years over salmon. But he's there, every Sunday, without fail. As for the Talbots, Gerald and Donna are awaiting trial. Forgery, fraud, child neglect. The house in Henrico County is under a second mortgage to cover the restitution payment. Gerald was asked to resign from his position at First Baptist's Board of Deacons. He did not go quietly. Donna, who cooperated with the investigation, may receive a reduced charge. Megan moved in with an aunt in Fredericksburg and got a job at a retail store. The first job she's ever had. I go to therapy every Thursday. A woman named Dr. Torres who has a small office with a ficus plant and doesn't tell me how to feel. She just asks questions and lets me find my own answers, which, after 21 years of being told what to think, feels like learning a new language. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Some mornings I still wake up at 5 a.m. with my heart racing, already mentally cataloging chores that no longer exist. But then I open the curtains, and there's the sky, and I remember where I am. I want to be clear about something before I go. This story isn't about revenge. I know it might look that way. The courtroom, the ruling, the restitution order, the criminal charges. But revenge would mean I wanted Gerald to suffer the way I suffered, and I don't. I want him to be held accountable. Those are different things. Revenge is a fire you light hoping it burns someone else. Accountability is just turning on the lights so everyone can see what was already there. If you're in a family where you're tolerated instead of loved, where your presence is endured, not valued, where you've been taught that gratitude means silence and obedience means survival, I want you to hear this. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. The people who made you feel like a burden were carrying their own debts, and they put the weight on you because you were small enough to accept it. You deserve to know your own name. Family isn't paperwork. It isn't a court decree or an adoption file or a signature, forged or otherwise. Family is the person who sits with you while you learn to trust again. The person who says of course when you ask for proof instead of faith. The person who holds the door and doesn't ask you to be grateful for it. Last Sunday, Richard and I sat on the porch of the bungalow on the Fan District Street, the one with the red door. He was drinking coffee. I was reading. Neither of us was talking, and it was the most comfortable silence I've ever known. At one point, he looked over and said, "I'm glad you're here." And I said, "Me too." My name is Hillary Whitford, and for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, recognition, or just the quiet understanding that you've been in a room like that too, write it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want to hear what happened to a woman whose in-laws threw her out of the house on Christmas Eve, that story's in the description below. Click it. I promise you won't regret it. Until next time, Take care of yourselves. And if someone's still telling you that you should be grateful for being mistreated, you have permission to stop listening.